Welcome to Wonders and Miracles podcast, where we celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm Liza Lawrence. I'm glad to have you join me as we celebrate wonders and miracles together. All right. Well, I am here with Brandi today, and she's from Utah, and she's going to share with us her journey over the past year or so of some divine timing. She had her father pass climbing Mount Everest, and she might touch on some of that, and seeing the hand of God throughout this whole process of healing, grieving, growing, all of those things. And I'm really excited to have her on here. There's also a fun connection with Brandi and I. She was a student at the university I teach at, and we had her over and played and did some fun things. And I think you were into yoga at that time. You were just such a beautiful student that came and connected with our family, and I loved it. And I think your connection was it with my husband's meditation class? Is that where you met him? And then you and Allie came over, and we had some fun conversations and fun experiences. So I've followed you on social media, and it's been fun to watch your journey. So fun to connect again. And go ahead and tell us some of the things that you've been through and the things that you've learned and where you've seen God.
Great. Well, thank you for having me on. I've been also following this podcast, and it's been so fun to hear everyone's journey, the highs, the lows, the difference of all of them. And there's definitely some that have just kind of sustained me as well. So I'm grateful for this podcast. Thanks for letting me on. My feeling was to talk about like divine timing and different things. And I really wanted to do something that would help people feel comforted at this time too. Trust in the unfolding of the Earth's events, of what's happening, that it's safe to trust that. I'm excited to talk about this because of everything that's going on in the world right now. I just feel like these types of experiences and trusting this process is really, really important. So as Liza mentioned, my dad passed away on Mount Everest. It was the 7th summit of his journey to accomplish the highest summit on every continent. And this was the last one. This is the one that he was preparing for with all of the others. And so when we found out, obviously it was quite a shock. There was definitely a lot of grief and fear and these different experiences, but I also had a very strong feeling that this was okay. It's hard to explain how to express that kind of experience. But I remember the morning that we found out, before I'd found out, my mom had called and just wanted to ask about, like, do you think he's okay? We haven't heard from him. People from Camp 4 haven't seen him yet. We're getting a little nervous. And I remember telling my mom, like, Mom, like, we would feel if something had gone wrong. And I just remember feeling so strongly about that because I've had pretty strong intuition, and I know my mom has a strong intuition, and I had slept super great. My siblings all slept super great that night. And I just remember saying, like, Mom, I think we would know if something were wrong. And that was something that I offered to her, comfort, before we found out. And so when we found out, obviously there's the shock and the fear from that whole experience and kind of a trauma from that. But I also had a very strong feeling that I remembered the feeling I told her about of this wasn't something that had gone wrong, that there was a reason for it, that we would know if there was something that was off about it. And so the piece that I'd felt before, I was able to kind of retain that through kind of those early stages of grief and shock when you find, a sudden passing of someone that you love and someone that's a key figure in your life. But it did sustain me. It helped me kind of hold on to an understanding that there was a meaning to it, that there was a purpose to it, and that there was a divine timing that was coming forth in that passing as well. Both my mom and I had strong confirmation spiritually about, my dad's timing on this earth, that if it wasn't the mountain, it might have been something else.
Interesting.
Yeah. And my mom, like, even that whole week, we just had some really beautiful conversations together because obviously she was in shock as well. We went to a movie one night and she, we just talked after, and she said, Brandi, like, I'm looking back, this makes so much sense. She's like, I don't know how that works, but I've been able to see, I always wondered, why was he in such a rush? Why was he always in such a rush to do things? He wanted to sail. And she was like, we're not even 50 yet. Why do you want to go sailing? This is something we could do in our old age. And he wanted to do it. He wanted to learn how to sail and sail with my mom, and they did that. And she says, I understand why now. I understand why he was in such a rush. Maybe on some level, his spirit knew that he would only have so much time here, and he wanted to live it big. He wanted to do all the things. And so it was just beautiful confirmations like that we experienced together that helped us realize that this was okay. It was something that was almost supposed to happen. And we felt like it was supposed to happen. She mentioned too that he had made restitution with all of these different people in his life before he left on the mountain. He did Mount Vincent, which is in Antarctica, in January, and then he left in April for Everest. And between those mountains, after he'd come back, he'd quit his corporate job and just was going to do these mountains and kind of finish strong. And it was really the happiest we'd ever seen him, as he had that goal. But also he organized his entire life, which is crazy, again, looking back, that he had filed everything. He had put everything in order. He'd gone through all of his stuff. So physically, he was ready. And then emotionally, he was ready. He had gone to, a neighbor who he'd had bad feelings with and made restitution with that. And I remember my mom saying, like, I had never expected that to happen, because they'd had such bad blood between them.
That is very interesting to see that he was doing these things.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And I don't know that he didn't know that. I don't think that he thought
On a
anything.
conscious level. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. But I think maybe on some level, he wanted to make sure that everything was in order, because he did know the risks of climbing Mount Everest. And he did know that, it's a 5% chance of everyone who climbs to pass away. But he also was very jovial about things like that. Like he would say, like, oh, I signed a waiver that says if I die, that they can zip up my carcass into a sleeping bag and just push me into a crevasse. And he would joke about it because it was kind of funny for him too, in a sense. I think he always saw, the bigger picture in a way. He wasn't too worried about that. So it just was very interesting how much we saw that divine timing and that hand of God, even in something that feels like it could be such a tragedy. My mom at his funeral, that was really her message, was his death was not a tragedy. And she just wanted everyone to feel that, like, this was not a mistake. This was not a tragedy. An unlived life is a tragedy, is what she said. And that was like my favorite line from her, from that whole celebration of life, is what we called it. Celebration experience was that.
I love that. And I agree with that. An unlived life is tragedy.
Yeah.
Because we are meant to come and partake of this life and experience everything that we can, because we learn and grow through those experiences. That's beautiful. Right. I love that.
Right. And he did live that way. And that was the legacy that he left us, was live big, do the things that will make your life worth living, and don't wait to live your life. Don't wait till you're, older. Don't wait till you're more financially established or whatever it is, that you would always be waiting. Mm-hmm. But he really went and did the things and encouraged everyone to do that. So with his celebration, we saw how much his spirit and his purpose here influenced so many people. And we had an entire stake center full of people from all walks of life. We had, a whole group in the back of just super tattooed, people that hadn't gone to a church for years and were there to celebrate him. And we saw his influence, and we still see his influence. People will tell us all the time about, things that they push themselves to do that they maybe have not otherwise done, because of my dad, because of what he lived for and what he died for, in a sense.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So take us on your journey. Where else through this grief process because you're doing so well, tell us what you did and how you feel like you were sustained and supported through that process.
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned, the kind of early comforts really helped me with kind of everything that would kind of come. It's coming up on a year. This May will be a year, but I had a really cool experience the morning after Dad passed. I, found out the day before, and then had kind of the whole night to really grieve and to process different things. And then I was driving to my parents' house in the morning, and there was a beautiful song that came on the radio called Glorious Unfolding. it was one of those moments where the Spirit just takes your attention and puts it on the song and says, this is for you. And this is, this is your dad's message to you. And it's just talking about how there's this glorious unfolding that's still waiting to happen. And the lyrics just totally were from him, and it was really cool. And then I watched the music video later, and it's actually a story about a dad passing away and like
Wow.
saying things to his daughter. The whole music video is her going on this like scavenger hunt around the world where she like finds these little pieces of him and like his messages and different things, and it's just like, the lyrics is like, it's going to be a glorious unfolding, like just wait and see, like trust, there's so much of the story that's still yet to unfold is one of the lines. And that to me was such a comfort of, even though my dad's life had fulfilled and completed its purpose, that he was still going to be helping me unfold in my life, and this glorious unfolding of the divine timing for me. One of the things that has been difficult for me, I'm 30 this year, and I still haven't found my person. And in the LDS culture, that can feel really lonely and feel really intense. And I remember talking about, even with my dad's experience, I was crying just as much before he died as when he died, because I was still trying to figure out this whole dating thing and really pleading the Lord for help with all of that. But after he passed, the next morning also, I got a text from one of my good friends who said, hey, I never do this, but there's this guy and I want to set you up. And I hadn't told anybody at that point, but it was so interesting because that to me meant this dad is helping me with this, that he did everything he could on this side, but that I needed help from him on the other side, that he could direct and help with work from that side to help me get ready or to help my person get ready or whatever it is. And that was such a comfort to me. It was just a little sign from Dad of, I'm helping you with this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need that. I don't know what else to do.
I love that. Just that little gift. So cute. I love that.
Yeah. And it's been a cool experience to really trust in that too. And to see, like, I have a greater faith that will happen for me because I have someone on the other side that I know that means a lot to. And well, I think everyone has an eternal family, whether they find it in this life or not, but that he was with my children, right? He's with the spirits that would be mine, and he can help in different ways than maybe he wasn't able to help here. So for me, that's been part of this kind of divine unfolding of everything, is just trusting in that, because that's been a hard journey for me to go through, that now my dad is with me in. And I feel very, very grateful for that help. It's really strongly like a divine help that I've really needed.
I love that. And I love that you felt that and that you're aware of that's taking place on the other side. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's been really neat. I've been really grateful. And I've seen it in all of my siblings as well. Siblings that have, gone different directions with their grief. Some of them having to kind of go to a rock bottom place. Some of them that things that were happening in their family were able to come forth so that those things could be resolved and healed. And my strong impression was that Dad was in charge of that he was helping bring that out so that nothing, wouldn't continue or whatever. And that was, I think, just because he's on that side, and we've had to connect with him through the other side. And then, I mean, my mom has seen, this divine timing, this divine hand in everything that she's done. She disclosed to me that she feels like every night she spends the entire night with my dad, that when she goes to bed, she dreams of him the whole night. And I just love that. I think it's so sweet, and just helps me remember that they're not gone, they're still with us so closely, and they want to be with us so closely.
That's such a powerful message right now too, because there's a lot of grief going on on the planet, with just, there's a heaviness, it feels like. And so to be aware that we have people on the other side that are supporting us, cheering us on, encouraging us, helping us through this journey, if we can remember that and even tap into that and be aware of that, is so helpful for us. And I think that's beautiful that your mom is aware of that, and you're aware of that you can feel him so strongly helping.
And And I feel like people have been being called home. Like there's been so many people just going to gatherings and hearing about people's this last year specifically. So many people have been being called home. I mean, even Kobe Bryant, right? Like even these kind of idols in our culture that feels like they're being called to the other side, not for any other reason than that they're needed on the other side. And that's my belief on it is we need, both sides of the veil working hard right now. And some people I think can do more from that side, or they're complete on this side. And so they can help from the other side. Yeah. I like where you were headed in that, like, that's heavy right now. How do we find that hand of the Lord or that divine timing, even in the darkness, right? Because we're all experiencing this darkness.
What are ways that you've found to help you through? Because you've obviously been through a grieving process this year, and many people are grieving right now on the earth or afraid, feeling that sense of fear of the unknown and uncertainty of, what's going on the planet.
Right.
What are ways we can see God and access that divine guidance and timing in our lives?
Yeah, I love that. I think the first thing that jumps to mind right away is to be okay with the journey and the process of going into the darkness. Sometimes we can't emerge into the light until we've shined light on the chaos, until we've listened into and truly let all of the range of emotions come up. I think that's one thing that both my mom and I were prepared for with my dad's passing, is she's a therapist and I do like energy healing. And both of us have a very strong understanding that all of the range of emotions are important, and it's important to feel whatever it is that you're feeling. And so for us, just being willing to feel into all of the range, the yucky and the grief and the anger and the just being okay with that being the journey helps us stop, almost stop controlling what we think the outcome should be, right? It's just letting it be whatever it is. And I think right now we're seeing that a lot with people kind of having to face some of their internal stuff, whether it's financial fear, or whether they don't love their job or their work or their different things. And they have to face it right now. We're kind of forced to face our family issues. And it's I think being willing to feel into that and being willing to slow down and actually listen to that and shine that light of awareness on it, that does so much more than I think anything that I've seen as far as just trusting the process.
And so what does that look like? Because I think a lot of times we don't like to look at that darkness because we're ashamed of it and we're afraid of it.
Right.
And we judge it. We think that there must be something wrong with us if we are that dark or if we hold those emotions. So what's a good way to look at it and actually be okay looking at it? Do you have tools or things that have helped with that process?
Yeah. I think one of the ones that has helped me most is kind of meditative tools, these tools of mindfulness, of just starting to become aware of how you're feeling. I think when I first started learning kind of mindfulness or meditation tools, I just wasn't even aware of how loud my mind was and how often my emotions were swinging back and forth. And so just kind of letting myself start to listen to how much my mind is talking, or how deeply I feel about different things, it starts to create that awareness between the thoughts and the emotions and gives a little bit of space there. And then as you practice that, you can kind of fine tune that ability, where there's times where, when I first started, I would just find a place in my home that felt very safe and comfortable. I'd have lots of pillows there, and I would just go there for 10 minutes. I would set a timer, and just 10 minutes, I'm just going to feel everything that I feel. And I would just go to that little safe place. I wouldn't judge what I was feeling. I wouldn't freak out about what I was feeling. I knew that just for 10 minutes, I was just going to let the stuff up. And as scary as that was, and as painful as that was, I knew that it was just going to be 10 minutes that I felt into that and let it come up. And then as I practiced that, the stuff that had been building in the background had an outlet, and I could find, that I could move on with my day or with other things without feeling this flood of repressed emotion
Uh-huh.
all the time. But that's a great practice of, especially if you're new to this kind of, emotional regulation, to just take some time where you just feel and notice what you're feeling. You can try and identify it with your mind, or you can just be willing to turn up the dial of, I'm going to imagine that there's a volume button, and just be willing to turn it up to a 10 for the next 10 minutes. I'm just going to listen to all the stuff. And you'd be amazed how easy that becomes eventually. At first, it feels really hard or scary. But when you start to see that it kind of, what I call, births these emotions, it gets really, really intense and then it relieves.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of bursts these emotions out of you so that you're not carrying them around or always pushing them back.
And I love that, because I think that's the goal, is to help process them out of the system. And the first step is to know that they're there.
Right.
Just to be okay that they're there. And I love that birthing process, because it can get intense, really intense, but then there is a release of, okay, I just dealt with that.
Yes.
I gave voice to it. And
And I
anyway.
think it's a trust in that, right? It's a trust that if you feel it, that it will change. I think the reason we don't feel it, we want to push things back, is because we're so scared of that becoming a reality, or becoming something that is us, rather than something that we experienced. And when you can learn that trust of, okay, there's going to be a breaking point for this, or the fever is going to break at some point, then it's easier to trust into these experiences. And even, on an emotional level, but also on the world level right now, we can trust in this experience of this pandemic. There's something that is important here, that if everyone just kind of lets themselves slow down and feel into what's coming up for them, the stress, the struggle, the pain in their family lives, or, the chaos that they're feeling, then as they kind of dive into that deeper, heavier, darker stuff, they will be able to excavate that and pull out into peace or understanding or freedom. Maybe they're focused on the wrong things, or maybe there's, things that they can't control that they can let go of. But doing that emotional listening into and feeling into and willing to go into the dark will help them get into the light faster.
I love that. And I agree. I love that simple process of set a timer for 10 minutes. It'll be over. It's not going to last forever.
You can go
But
back to
feel
your
it.
life. Yeah, you can go back to whatever you're doing before this, whatever you've been doing, you can go back to it. It helps your mind relax about it and says, okay, for these next minutes, I'm just going to experiment with that. I'm just going to try that. And then it starts to get easier and easier to feel through things.
I love that. And as I've been feeling all the feels, because the world does feel heavy to me right now, because I do think there's a lot of heaviness going on. And as I've meditated and prayed about it and asked for help, like, how do I see my way out or see another way? I'm always feeling, and I have a picture of Jesus that I sit with when I'm meditating. And
Beautiful.
I feel him saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. It's like that scripture just repeats. Like, I am the way. If you focus on me, because Christ is love, period. That is who he is. And that love is what will open us up to the healing. And so that's just been my constant reminder, is I am the way. Like, tap into me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And just one other thing on that is, as we are feeling into something, and we bring all of that sense of awareness and we bring our full selves into that experience, it changes the experience. There was one time where I got super, super sick with the flu, and people can probably relate to that right now too, or like the sickness. And I just got very, very present with it. If I'm feeling this in my body, and I just really turned that up and let myself feel it. And it was interesting because someone later said, like, oh, I'm so sorry that you were that sick. And I remember having this impression of, don't be sorry. It was actually a really cool experience for me, which I would never have expected, right? But when you really dive into it and feel into it, and you allow all of that light, and that light of, love, and letting Christ be the way in that, and getting as present as you can with that, it does change the darkness, even as you're going through it. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I love that too. I mean, that's what we came here to experience on this earth is everything, the dark
Right.
and the light. And
Right.
so to allow ourselves to truly feel the experience of things, I think is powerful, and it helps us learn and grow in really big ways. So,
Yes, I fully
yeah.
agree.
Yeah. So any other tools that you do or that has helped you, or ways that you've seen God through this journey of life, the unfolding of life?
Yeah, I think it's safe to ask for those signs. I think that's one thing that I've learned through this is it's okay to ask for those tender mercies, those little snippets. And then when you have them, to really hold on to them, to really let that, sometimes I'll go through these experiences, and this is more even with being single than it has been with my dad passing, but it's like the darkness feels so thick. There's such, a battering of doubt or of fear or of all these different thoughts or these feelings that really is truly opposition, and I'll just kind of focus in on the light spot in my mind, whether that's I'm trusting that I'm becoming a person that I like being. I trust that there's a purpose to all of this, or there's a purpose to this pain, and I just try and find the lightness and let that be my focus, right? This letting Christ be the way. And then as I focus on that and just start to recognize that what I'm hearing and feeling is not me, that it could be the opposition, that it could be some darkness or some doubt or some other things. And it helps me as I focus in on the light, I can just start to hear and discern the difference. And then that light starts to grow a little bit brighter. And I believe in that thought more than I believe in the other thoughts that feel so true. They feel so real in that moment, but there's still a light spot that I can always find. And then sometimes it brings you to your knees of asking for deliverance on some of these things, because they can be so intense and the darkness can feel so real. And that's okay too, because even if you're praying, sometimes it's like praying for death because it's so intense. Like just praying to be taken home. But even that prayer kind of reaches into the heavens and helps us find that little, lanyard of light of I'm still praying. Even though I want to pray for destruction, I am still praying.
Mm-hmm.
And that, at least for me, it always breaks the opposition as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's important at this time too.
I think there's a lot going on with that side, with opposition that we're facing.
And I totally relate to that, where sometimes you're praying for just an end. Like just take me home. Let me be done with this pain. I'm done with this
I've
pain.
Done great. Yeah, I've done really good.
I think I've learned
enough.
Satisfied. Right. And I love that God is like, no, you're not quite done, but I'll give you a glimpse of hope. I'll give you a glimpse of light. You can carry on. I know
Right.
you can. And sometimes we don't want to hear that, but it's true.
Right. And we do make it out a little bit stronger, a little bit more cleared. Whenever I go to that place, when I emerge from there, I'm like, oh, wow, like the sun is shining. And, these little things that I'm like, interesting, that I wasn't necessarily appreciating before.
Yeah. Yeah. There is that purpose in opposition. And I do think it helps us, it helps our perspective shift when we come back out of the darkness.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, anything else that you want to share that you feel passionate about right now?
I think just along those same lines of recognizing when the voices in your mind are not yours, that there is that opposition that wants to talk and be very, very loud, especially at this time. And I think that's part of what our work is to do right now, with everything getting heavy and having this intensity. And there's a way to free up those spirits or those energies or whatever you want to call them too. And that is through prayer, and that is through leading them to Christ as well. One of my favorite meditations that I've recently discovered intuitively was like imagining increasing the light of Christ that's within you. And so I just think of all of us having this light of Christ, and especially when we're being attacked or having these entities or these negative spirits around us, we can kind of increase our sense of the light of Christ, almost like that dimmer switch, like we talked about with turning up emotions, but turning up the light within us. And then recognizing that those energies are hungry for light and truth, and that they've been looking from you, but that as you can turn up that light of Christ, that can get so strong that remind them that that's what they're looking for. And that to me is one of the most powerful ways to release from, negativity or doubts or these things that truly are not us, and show them where they can go. And that's, yeah, I love that one. So
Nice. That is a cool meditation. That's really cool.
yeah, in this pandemic especially, I'm like, there is so much coming out, like of me, of my people, like I'm like I've been holding this for years.
I know.
Okay, like, but it's also, I mean, when you release it, it's like, okay, cool, I don't have to believe in that, I don't have to see that as me.
And what are good ways, because I know your mom's a therapist and you do the energy healing, what are good ways to guide people through releasing some of these things?
Yeah. I think if they can, to have help from a professional, I don't think that's a bad idea. Either a therapist, someone who does this kind of work, someone who's been there before. I've noticed when people start getting into it, they can feel like so overwhelmed by it, and like they have no, handhold onto anything. And if they can, to have someone walk them through it, have someone like teach them how to do it. It's just easier, it's like if I were to try and learn how to cook, I'd like someone to or
Yeah.
just if that's someone's talent, that you can ask for help with that. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because I think that is maybe some of the heaviness that we feel right now is we feel like we have to do it by ourselves or
Right.
that we're all alone in this. And that's scary to think
Mm-hmm.
like, how do I help? How do I carry this by myself?
Yeah.
It's too much.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think if that feels right to them, that's a great way to start, especially if their stuff is a little bit more intense. And then also I think increasing your spirituality, like getting that sense of, I can be watched over, I can do visualizations where I look at the backpack that I'm holding and give it back to the person that came from, or giving it to Christ and letting him carry my burdens. I love those kind of visualizations because it helps our mind and our body feel free of that kind of thing. And just, that is prayer, that is repentance, that is all of the things that we talk about, but we get to really hand it over and say, I don't know what to do with this. I think everyone gets to a point on some level of their life where they can't do it, right? Like the Alcoholics Anonymous stuff, like I come to realize that I am on my own powerless, and then to realize that there is a higher power that has to help us with things. I think when we learn how to do this type of work, that is what it's doing. I can't save myself. I can't do this journey alone. I have to have a higher power, and I have to be inspired about what that's going to look like. And whether that's professionals or whether that's, diet stuff, or that people can be guided and led to what's going to be the best journey for them. Maybe they have heavy depression and they, can clean up their diet first. And then that, as they do that, they're guided to other things, or, but they still can find, I guess depression is a hard one to say because you don't feel connected, right? That's like the hardest part of depression, is you don't feel like you have a sense of spirituality.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. And that's part of depression, I think, is like you feel like you're off and you feel guilty about it and you can't find it, you can't figure it out.
Yeah. We're here to learn different things. And
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
your wisdom will come through your struggle. And if your struggle has been to find God and you find him eventually, wow, powerful experience and journey where
Right.
someone else is trying to learn something different, and they needed God there to hold their hand the whole way. Like there's wisdom in all of these experiences that can feel
Yeah.
really dark and heavy. And I love that that's some of the things that you've learned through life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
And
I think that principle of turning it up helps with depression stuff too, of, I do feel disconnected. And what if you went into that? I think, people are, at least I've experienced depression. Like it's so scary to think of, I'm going to spiral, or I'm going to get into a really heavy place if I feel what I'm feeling. So that's the fear of it. But if you can really feel into it and let it be as big as, it's usually the fear of the fear, right? It's the fear of this being bigger than it is. And so we keep trying to push it back or manage it in different ways.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you do work and you teach classes on healing and processing emotions and all of those things. Tell us a little bit more about the work that you do.
So currently I see clients virtually. So whether that's FaceTime or Zoom or just over the phone, and I just, kind of use muscle testing and intuition to help them with whatever they're going through. A lot of times I end up teaching them certain principles. And so I've been kind of gathering those techniques and those tools, and just started with like a social media platform, doing that on Instagram or Facebook. But eventually I'll get that kind of consolidated into maybe a course or something like that. So yeah, I've just been kind of learning and letting that unfold with this too, because I feel like it's important and people need it. But I also feel like I'm not in charge of it, and I don't want to be in charge of it. So I'm letting God kind of work with me on how that's going to look and what that's going to do. But it's been, it's cool. I feel like God sends me the right people and things that I need to heal from as well. I'll have people that kind of bring up some things for me, and that's us healing,
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I've been at with that, of offering kind of those tools or those things. I think it's unfolding, but definitely still seeing clients and helping people through this time. It's interesting because as this pandemic has hit, my work has slowed, but not just because people don't come, it's because the work has been so heavy. And so I could do maybe help two people in a day, whereas before it was maybe 4. But just because the heaviness of everything going on, you can only do so much. So I don't know, trusting that we're coming out of this as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
They can find me on like my social media, Brandi Cash on Facebook, or Instagram name is the Brandi Cash. And then also I have a website, brandicash.com. So those are some ways they can kind of send a message through that. I get it in my email, can answer that way. But yeah.
Well, I watched on Monday, you did a live with tapping. And
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. I went through and I loved actually how you explained it, because you really explain things very well and why they're effective and from what backgrounds they come from. I loved that you said, it's an Eastern tradition and Western tradition kind of mixed, which I love combining tools so much when we're looking at healing and self-help and, on our journey, our spiritual journey, because that's what this is. This whole life experience is a divine journey. And it will unfold in divine ways if we trust that process, which I think is just such a beautiful message you're sharing. Like, trust that process.
Yeah. And trust will be better than what you could imagine, right? Like, it will all work out even better than what we think.
Mm-hmm.
And the steps will come, the next right step, right? It will be there when it's ready.
Mm-hmm. That can be tricky when we want to see the whole picture. But really, we do need to just take that one step and trust that when it's time, the next thing will be revealed to us.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's okay if you don't feel that sometimes, I've had to learn that that's okay if I don't always feel guided or always feel led,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe inspired inaction is okay today. Maybe it's okay to not do the things that I think that I should do, and trust that.
Yes, which I think actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think there is purpose in rest.
Yes.
And when we're always trying to do and fix, we can burn out sometimes. And rest is really critical.
Yes.
Also, I mean, you look at the law of the Sabbath, that is what it is. Take a rest.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I'm sure all of us, we've been more geared towards the burnout mode than we have towards the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think of a pendulum, if you overwork, you're going to have to underwork for a while to balance it out.
Yeah. I love that. Well, Brandi, this has been so fun. Anything else you wanted to share or that you've learned through your life?
I think that's everything I can think of.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for listening to this miracle story. Please subscribe to my channel